He was a king of boundless appetites. Henry VIII, the second Tudor king, devoured life with the same ferocity he did his meals. He craved power, women and glory, shaping England in his image through sheer force of will. He broke with the church for a divorce. He beheaded those who defied him, leaving a trail of blood and terror in his wake. Yet even kings are mortal. The year is 1536. Henry, once a vibrant athlete, now bears the weight of his 45 years. He desires a son, an heir to secure the Tudor dynasty. But fate, it seems, has other plans. This is the story of his horrifying descent. The seeds of Henry's downfall were sown long before his final days. His legendary appetites, once a testament to his vitality, had begun to consume him from within. Years of rich food and excessive indulgence had transformed his once athletic physique into a bloated caricature. Wounds slow to heal with age festered beneath his finery. The man who had once charmed and intimidated was becoming a prisoner in his own decaying body. The court, once a stage for power, transformed into a viper's nest of suspicion and fear. The sun beat down on the tilt yard at Greenwich Palace, its rays glinting off polished armour. It was January of 1536, a time for celebration. Queen Anne Boleyn was pregnant, and the king, ever the showman, had organised a grand tournament. Clad in gleaming plate armour, Henry was a formidable sight. The crowd roared as he entered the lists, his eyes flashing with the thrill of competition. But beneath the merriment, a sense of unease lingered. The king, though still imposing, was no longer the young, agile warrior he once was. The joust commenced with the fanfare of trumpets and the thunder of hooves. The two knights charged, their encounter a blur of speed and violence. The crowd gasped as Henry's lance shattered, failing to unseat his opponent, but something was wrong. The king swayed precariously in the saddle. His horse, startled, reared back. With a sickening thud, Henry was thrown from his mount, crashing onto the earth. The music stopped. The joyous atmosphere was replaced by chilling silence. Frantic hands rushed to the fallen king, faces etched with concern and fear. It took several men to roll him over, their faces paling at the extent of his injuries. The king's leg, twisted at an unnatural angle, was clearly broken, but it was the wound on his thigh that caused the most alarm. A shard of his own lance had pierced his flesh. The court physician worked quickly to staunch the bleeding as Henry drifted in and out of consciousness. The jousting accident, meant to be a celebration, had delivered a cruel blow. Unbeknownst to all, this wound would mark the beginning of a long and agonizing decline. The jousting accident exposed a vulnerability hidden beneath the layers of finery and armor. The wound to his leg refused to heal, deepening into persistent agony. Court physicians tried everything, but infection advanced relentlessly. The stench of rot began to permeate the king's private chambers, a constant reminder of his deteriorating condition. Henry, accustomed to the world bending to his will, found himself a prisoner in his own body. The once energetic king was now confined, his world shrinking with every agonizing hour. The festering wound on Henry's leg began to exude a foul odour that permeated the air. What was once whispered in hushed tones soon became an unavoidable truth. The king, once revered for his strength, was now an object of pity and disgust. No amount of incense or perfume could mask the stench that clung to him. Courtiers, once eager for his favour, now shrank back in revulsion and fear. The laughter and conversation that once filled his chambers were replaced by strained silence. As the years wore on, Henry's transformation became impossible to ignore. The festering wound hindered his mobility and sapped his strength. His once powerful legs now struggled to support his weight, forcing him to rely on canes and wary attendants. Years of indulgence had transformed his physique into a bloated caricature. His clothing strained at the seams, barely containing his corpulence. The once handsome king now bore little resemblance to his former self. The physical torment Henry endured was only one facet of his decline. The wound on his leg seemed to mirror a deeper sickness in his mind. The once boisterous king retreated into himself, his jovial nature replaced by brooding silence. Isolation bred suspicion. Every whisper and glance seemed a veiled threat. The court, once vibrant, became a stage for paranoia. Those who had once enjoyed the king's favor now trembled in his presence. Fear, once a tool for control, now held Henry captive. Every ache and sleepless night fueled his paranoia. He became obsessed with his own mortality, convinced those around him plotted his demise. Trusted advisors found themselves accused of treason on the slightest pretext. Henry, consumed by fear, had become a tyrant, his reign of terror eclipsing even his father's. The court, once a place of splendor, was now a gilded cage of fear. Henry's paranoia manifested in a reign of terror that sent shockwaves through the court. Accusations of treason, often based on rumor, became commonplace. Former friends and allies were condemned on the flimsiest evidence. The Tower of London became a grim repository for the unjustly accused. Heads rolled for offences real and imagined, a grim spectacle of the king's madness. Even his wives, once beloved, were not immune. Anne Boleyn met her end on the executioner's block. The once mighty Henry VIII was now a shadow of his former self. Confined to his chambers, he was a prisoner in his own failing flesh. The jousting injury had never truly healed, a constant source of agony. Even the finest physicians were powerless against the decay. His once voracious appetite had dwindled to nothing. Food brought only discomfort. His imposing frame had withered, leaving him haunted by the spectre of death. The grand halls of Whitehall, once alive with music and laughter, were now eerily silent. Once alive with music and laughter were now eerily silent. Courtiers kept their distance, fearful of his temper and the stench of decay. Henry, once gregarious, was now utterly alone. His days were spent in pain and medication, his nights tormented by fevered dreams. He saw enemies everywhere, even in the faces of those he once trusted. The weight of paranoia pressed upon Henry, suffocating any remaining joy. He lashed out at those around him, his voice reduced to a hoarse whisper. Suspicions once whispered were now voiced openly, fueled by his erratic behavior. His grip on power, once absolute, was slipping away, eroded by pain and fear. The court, once a reflection of his strength, now mirrored his decline, a crumbling facade held together by fear. The end, when it finally arrived, was both anticipated and met with a strange sense of relief. After years of suffering, King Henry VIII, the once mighty ruler who had reshaped England, breathed his last on January 28, 1547. The news, whispered at first in hushed tones, quickly spread through the palace, a chilling wind that carried with it the weight of history. In the king's bedchamber, the air thick with the scent of decay, a hush fell over the assembled courtiers and servants. The king, his face pale and gaunt, lay still beneath the weight of the velvet covers. The once piercing blue eyes, now clouded and vacant, stared up at the intricately carved canopy bed, seeing sights unseen by those who stood vigil. The silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the muffled sobs, was heavy with unspoken words. Henry VIII, the king who had defied popes, beheaded wives, and ruled with an iron fist, was no more. His reign, a tumultuous tapestry woven from threads of power, passion, and paranoia, had reached its inevitable end. The death of a monarch, even one as feared as Henry VIII, demanded a certain spectacle. Preparations for the king's funeral commenced immediately, a macabre ballet of mourning rituals and courtly intrigue. Yet even in death, Henry's body, ravaged by years of excess and disease, continued its gruesome betrayal. The embalming process, meant to preserve the king's mortal remains for the traditional lying in state, proved a gruesome and challenging endeavor. The king's bloated corpse, already showing signs of decomposition, resisted the embalmer's best efforts. The stench, a horrifying blend of putrefaction and pungent chemicals, permeated every corner of the room, causing even the most hardened courtiers to gag and turn away. The weight of the king's body, a testament to his years of indulgence, posed an additional challenge. It took several men to move him, their faces pale with a mixture of exertion and revulsion, their hands trembling as they went about their grim task. The task of dressing the king in his finery, a ritual normally imbued with a sense of solemn respect, became an exercise in morbid curiosity. Art Henry VIII had craved grandeur in life, and he envisioned it in death as well. He'd begun planning a magnificent tomb, a monument to rival the greatest rulers in history. It was to be a testament to his power, his piety, at least as he saw it, and the enduring legacy of the Tudor dynasty. He spared no expense in its design, commissioning the finest artisans and importing the most precious materials. Yet, like so many of his later ambitions, the tomb became a monument to unfulfilled dreams. When Henry finally succumbed to his earthly torments, the tomb lay unfinished. The marble remained uncarved, the gold undelivered, the grand vision nothing more than sketches and dusty plans. Instead of his intended resting place, Henry was interred in a more modest vault at St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle. He lay beside his third wife, Jane Seymour, the only one of his 6 spouses to provide him with a legitimate son and heir. The unfinished tomb, standing as a silent testament to Henry's unfulfilled ambitions, became an ironic symbol of his reign. He'd yearned for immortality, for a legacy that would outshine all others. Yet he lay in death much as he had in life, surrounded by the trappings of power, but ultimately alone. His grand schemes, his forceful personality, his very presence were now mere echoes in the annals of history. The England he left behind was vastly different from the one he'd inherited. He'd broken with the Catholic Church, established himself as the supreme head of the Church of England, and forever altered the religious landscape of his nation. He'd sired 3 children who would each in their turn rule England. Yet his legacy was a complex and troubled one. His quest for a male heir had led him to marry 6 times, leaving a trail of broken hearts, shattered lives and blood on the executioner's block. King Henry VIII's gruesome demise was more than just a physical decay. It was a haunting echo of his reign. The fear he instilled, the isolation he imposed on himself and others, the stench of decay that permeated his court, all these mirrored the darkness that had descended upon England under his rule. He had sought to defy human frailty, to bend the world to his will, yet his body betrayed him, revealing the vulnerability that lay beneath the facade of power. In the end, even a king, even Henry VIII, was reduced to dust. His unfinished tomb, a silent witness to his unfulfilled ambitions, serves as a potent reminder of the ephemeral nature of power. Henry's legacy, much like his life, remains a tapestry of contradictions, a blend of brutality and brilliance, of profound change and devastating loss. He left an indelible mark on England, shaping its religious and political landscape for centuries to come. Yet he also left behind a stark warning that even the mightiest of monarchs are subject to the inexorable march of time and the inevitability of death. The horrifying demise of King Henry VIII serves as a timeless reminder that power, no matter how absolute, is ultimately fleeting, and that the true measure of a life lies not in the grandeur of one's reign, but in the impact one leaves on the hearts and minds of those they leave behind.